provocateur.media.
Boy, this whole debate is making me so hungry. I'm eating these chocolate chip cookies because I think my brain is now convincing me they don't exist. And if they're a simulation, they have no calories. Let's test this and see if my butt's bigger tomorrow or not.
The Goldwaters is brought to you by Goldwater Dubé, shaping the history of Canadian family law since 1981.
The Goldwaters vous est présenté par Goldwater Dubé, modeler l'histoire du droit familial canadien depuis 1981.
Welcome to Lucky Episode 13 of The Goldwaters. I'm your moderator, Dan Delmar. Hello, Goldwaters.
Hello, Dan.
Hi, Dan.
Hi, Goldwaters.
How are we today?
Good, thanks.
Excellent. We're going to zoom out today. Last podcast, we spoke about religion versus spirituality. We're going to look even further out and talk about this concept of a simulation, the big simulation. Is this all a simulation? These questions sound crazy, of course, even, slightly disturbed, but there are a lot of very intelligent people around the world, including Elon Musk of Tesla and SpaceX, who are convinced that we are living in a simulation of some form. And he thinks this is possible, that the universe is a creation of some kind of programmer somewhere out there. So today in the podcast, we'll dig into whether we're all bits and bytes in some kind of supercomputer. And, what does it mean if we are? But before we get to the nuts and bolts of this argument, what do you make of it first on its surface? Has this ever been something that you've thought about in your life, whether or not we are living in a kind of Sims-like simulation?
I think Daniel, I remember having conversations with you when we were kids about is this all a dream, or what if we're really just in a coma, or what if I'm the only one who exists and you guys are all figments of my imagination or my dreams? And the conversations were fun to get into, but they tended to stop pretty shortly with just, no, that sounds ridiculous. And that was kind of it. So I guess at this point, that's still kind of where I'm at.
I mean, there's something I've always found very seductive about the idea, I have to tell you, that this is an illusion. People often say, jokingly, when I close my eyes, you all disappear, right? The idea of subjectivity. And I have always thought about that maybe this is true. Like, Dan, this is your simulation, right? And that if you close your eyes, I really do disappear. To what extent do I know that I'm not part of your subjectivity? And it starts to help get over my ego. So these are fun ideas. They're playful. The extent to which I've ever seriously entertained them by trying to lift off like Neo in the Matrix, I can't really say that I have. I think that pain is the ultimate trump card to this debate. Apparently, there's a whole corpus of philosophy about this, is that pain is the only ultimate reality. It's the one thing that you cannot overcome through mental will totally at all times. You can't say to yourself that, well, this is all an illusion, so I'm just going to lie on hot coals for days and days. There's always a moment where you are jolted back into the reality of what we're in.
I think this is a domain that in a contemporary world is occupied by an odd mix of philosophers and physicists, and it's a world that belongs to them. Certainly, it has often been a trope of science fiction, the notion that reality is a simulation. I've always known that the Earth and this reality here is a simulation. I am the only person alive, and you are all created to provide me entertainment and some challenges. And you, in fact, are my two personal entertainment devices, Samantha, Daniel. I told you this a number of years ago when we were on our way to Future Shop, that I just created you, sort of popped out of my mind, and there you are, and you make me laugh. And it's awesome, but I created you. Of course, in fact, I did create you. There's an overlap between the simulation and somebody else's concept of objective reality. I think that...
So wait. So someone created a simulation where you're the main actor in it, and then you develop the powers to create further simulations
sure,
within this present simulation. But then that means that there's somebody else out there that is bigger, better, smarter, and more talented than you are because they created you.
It might be my own descendant that actually decided to do an ancestral simulation.
The best ancestor that they had decided, like, who's the best ancestor that we have? Oh, definitely Anne France Goldar. Let's create a whole simulation, a whole new world, all based around her. That sounds great.
But that being said, I think that when you start trying to get your mind around quantum physics, you start to realize that what's understood at the quantum level supports the argument that the universe is just a bunch of data and that could in fact be a simulation. First of all, it's possible we're living in the conversation right now for a nanosecond. We're in universe N, but that there's a sheath of N possible universes. So obviously they could all be simulations with slightly different outcomes in coding, because of course when you code, anytime anybody who programs, you recognize you always have to plan for different possibilities and different outcomes, right? You're generating random numbers. Random numbers will be different, each one from the other. So there could be an infinite number of universes coexisting all in the same space. That might be a way to explain dark matter, right? All coexisting in the same space where we're all just a little bit different. And in one of them, Samantha, you have a mustache, and Daniel, your eyes are blue.
I want a mustache.
Oh, you want the mustache?
No, it's mine. Too bad. Only I get the curly mustache.
But the concept that at a quantum level that the data you obtain are a function of the observer is hugely strange if there's a reality that's independent of the observer. When you grow up with classic philosophical thinking and you remove the philosophers who are mentally ill, the concept is that we have our own independent existence with a consciousness, and our different faculties permit us to observe what exists. Therefore, reality around us must have an existence independent of us, and reality must be real. If you leave that paradigm, and then reality could be a simulation, it seems to me you're in the world of quantum physics. We're back at this Schrodinger's cat, alive or dead. How come in the double slit experiment, when you shoot light through the double slits, how come if you shoot one little electron at a time, the scatter pattern on the other side of the double slit experiment show a scatter pattern as if all the light particles or waves or light were going through the two slits at the same time. All of this presupposes that there's coding, that there's actually somebody who programmed a simulation, this reality. And as we all know, from anybody who's been on a television set, if you want to depict a house, you don't have to depict all four walls. You can just depict as much as the camera sees, and everybody extrapolates the rest.
Mom, this sounds like a very intelligent design.
Yeah, it does. It certainly does.
Sorry, we're going back to religion. Oh my God, no!
Let me dig in a bit deeper to the modern version of this theory, and it brings in quantum mechanics, nanotechnology, AI. All of these can factor into this conception of a simulation. So it's been fathered by Nick Bostrom, a philosopher, and this is the person who Elon Musk was citing. There's an animated summary of his work at the Goldwaters.ca, by the way, if you want to check out the video to explain all of this. It's quite complicated, and Daniel, maybe you'll correct me, but I'll try to offer my a short recap here. We dealt with AI a little bit in episode 5 on tech ethics, and we probably all agree that we're only decades away from creating robots and AI that are basically indistinguishable from human beings. I think we're all pretty much on the same page there. So the theory goes, in centuries, they will be indistinguishable even at the molecular level, and will be creating their own civilizations, and some of those civilizations will be on other planets. And if we survive that long as a species, then we'll have these AIs propagating the human race in new ways all over the galaxy. So far, so good?
Well, at the end of the day, that's what we already did. Mm-hmm. We already did that. Inanimate matter became animate and became us. So the fact that we use other matter to create other simulacra of us is not incompatible with what happened in the history of the universe.
So it stands to reason then that these advanced humanoids, or what the philosopher describes as post-humans, human-AI hybrids or some form of that, could populate a planet, all the while not knowing their true origin and organically discover the means to independently create artificial life forms for themselves. So the theory is that there's a chance that we are those humanoids.
It sounds like Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
You were, right?
Yep.
Doesn't it? It all calls exactly that to mind. Because in the same way that we search desperately for our origins, and those could be our origins, because at the end of the day, we're a carbon-based life form. What is there that really distinguishes us from a rock consciousness? But at the end of the day, there was a time in the history of the universe where we were rocks, and now we are something we call human. And I think at the end of the day, the reason these physicists, scientists, and philosophers aren't recognizing the recursive nature of their inquiry, right, is because it all comes down to the abandonment of religion and the fear of death that comes from that. Because I've noticed, as people older than I have become older, they become more religious by reason of fear of death. And you want to believe there's a continuity and there's heaven, and the people you don't like will go to hell and all that good stuff. If you shed those fanciful beliefs and realize there's purely annihilation, then you want to think of other ways to attain immortality. And we're at a point scientifically, so says a guy like Bostrom or Musk or Kurzweil or Aubrey de Grey, we're at the cusp of immortality, and more mainstream scientists are recognizing this, that we're at the cusp of being able to prolong our lives indefinitely. And part of that is not just going to be biological advance, but some have very fanciful thoughts about uploading our consciousness into computers. I discount that. But other ones talk more about a cyborg type of being, where we will be one with the AI that we create. And then other philosophers who think further say, at what point do biological beings and artificial intelligence created out of silicon become indistinguishable? I put up my hand and say, well, we're the carbon-based life forms, and they're the silicon-based life forms.
Well, technically, our intelligence is already augmented by our smartphones. I mean, in my pocket, I have, 1,000 libraries of Alexandria on recall immediately, right? I mean, that has enhanced my intelligence in a way that is already a almost transhuman connection that's already occurring. It's actually Constantine, my brother-in-law, who is a software engineer, who had pointed this out to me, that essentially people in your network, friends that you have, when you ask someone a question, they're essentially storing data within them, and you can just recall them through inquiry. It's the same thing as essentially a search query on Google. It's just more person to person. And that's where you do get things like collective intelligence, a certain community can share. I mean, nothing that's sort of magical. I mean, it's just people sharing their skills and ideas to become something greater than, and to then prosper collectively. But taking it back to your point, Mom, I think that technically we're already there. I mean, it's in my pocket. It's just like a few centimeters above my skin when it dangles in my pocket.
That's what your dad was for. When we would have Friday night dinners or Tuesday night dinners, when you had the ultimate questions, including the questions about philosophy, these were the questions we turned to Dad for. It's like, Chaim, what do you think? Because he was and is the best read person I know. He probably doesn't quite compete with Google, but he was as close to Google as we used to get back in the day. But if you'll recollect, we did even involve, even then with our family dinners, to sometime halfway through the dinner, and it was usually you the culprit, Daniel, you'd come up with an unanswerable question, and we would run to the computer and immediately Google it. Or there were other search engines in the day. People forget there was a world prior to Google.
Ask Jeeves.
Yeah,
Right.
That's just what I was thinking of. Ask Jeeves. Nobody uses anything but Google anymore. But that's what we would do. We would enhance our intelligence immediately.
But then the question becomes, I'm always curious, like, what is that threshold? Actually, Peter Thiel, of all people, has gone on about this, that when we think of tech today, we think of digital technology. It's what people think of. They think of computers, when in fact, a piece of paper is tech. Right? I mean, a brick is tech. Anything.
A brick. That's why he's pro-Trump.
Well, it's whatever. It's a fine observation on its own. And to what extent are basic things that we use to throw stones to be able to, kill a beast or a small animal, an arrow? I mean, that helped us transcend the basic confines of life in the bush to a certain degree. We're on that continuum. So I always wonder, with the Kurzweils of the world, or the Aubrey de Greys or Bostrom, people in this transhumanist fervor, I just wonder, and that's what they call the singularity, I suppose. To them, that is the threshold to cross. And it always seems to me very ill-defined and smells like pseudoscience to me. It's nothing that it's all very theoretical. That's perhaps why it remains in the realm of theoretical physics and philosophers and snake oil salesmen.
Well, I think, once we get, if we're having one argument, which is the extent to which technology is going to, or current technology is going to merge with us in some way, or influence us, or a discussion about artificial intelligence, and that's one thing. And I do think that we're moving in the direction of smarter and smarter machines, and we are already doing a lot of work to, besides just the supercomputers that are in our pockets, to merge ourselves with robots. There are people with artificial robotic limbs that actually connect directly to their nerve cells or to their brains that they have some actual control over. So there are cyborgs amongst us now.
Still pretty experimental, but some very promising research out there.
Mm-hmm. I think that once we're getting the step further to, are we presently living in a simulation? So is everything around us not actually real, but there's some other being that created it for some reason, some post-human creature? That's just where it gets into sci-fi and fiction for me. It seems fun as an idea to entertain. I find it very difficult to fathom what could be evidence to support this. Further, I think that even once you get evidence, even if we knew that we were in a simulation, what difference would it make? Can we actually break out of it? So if we're just a series of zeros and ones, then can we program ourselves out of the simulation that we're presently in? It seems really bizarre. And the extra level of it, which I find is a bit of hubris, actually, even in proposing this as a serious proposition, rather than just like, a fun thought experiment to sort of, talk about the dinner table or after a couple of drinks or something.
We don't even need the alcohol.
We don't even need the alcohol to have this conversation. I think that it makes part of the assumption is that post-human beings or alien beings would have an interest in creating a simulation of us, and that this would be that somehow their motivations and their technology, their motivations are the same as ours in some way, and that their technology is just a more advanced version of what we already have, and they still program it in similar ways that we already do, just better, just at the next level. And I think that shows a bit of hubris. Like, why would I don't know. I can't even think of what a post-human creature would want to create a simulation. I can't even fathom getting into the mind of a creature that doesn't even exist today.
It's so evident to me that you are a mole planted by the architect to keep us mired in our mental slavery.
I am Agent Smith. That's actually,
I was about to call you Agent Smith.
We're going to delete you at the end of this podcast and liberate ourselves. Mole.
Well, only if you can, reprogram the simulation that you're already in. And assuming you're not a mole.
But
maybe I'm trying to break Mom free of this simulation.
This is Dan's simulation.
This is Dan's simulation.
We knew that this from the beginning.
Only I have the password to log in.
And delete us as subroutines.
And he's going to throw us in some sort of octagon, and the winner gets the password.
But wouldn't there be an advantage? I used to think when I would read all my best science fiction, because, of course, that's what pops to mind is the science fiction as opposed to the science texts. And I used to figure that, in the same way that we used to say that Stickman, who lives in 2 dimensions, is blithely unaware of the 3rd dimension that would permit him to turn 90 degrees from length and width. He is forever doomed to be flat. So I always thought that if we became aware of the fact that we were in a simulation, or at least I am, and you, the 2 offshoots of my brain, then that might permit us to become aware of the ability to travel in n-dimensional space-time. Because after all, even Einstein's theory of general relativity presumes that in the universe as we understand it, without resorting to quantum physics, we should be able to travel negatively on the axis of time. So where is that axis?
So
I'd love to travel the other way.
So do you mean...
It's right here.
Right. And so if we were going to simplify that and bring it into current technology, you mean that, like, if Mario figured out that he was actually in a video game and that...
With Luigi.
And in his cart with Masha. If he figured all this out, then, and he could sort of turn around and realize that we were there, then he could just like walk out of our computer screen and just be
Yeah, like Homer Simpson, like Tron. I mean, come on, this has been explored before. And I am convinced that the post-human humans or the post-human its, whatever they may just be viewing us as mindless entertainment. We are brain candy. We are their porn.
But why would post-humans care to have us as entertainment or as
bored.
anything? But
Because
why?
they're bored.
Why
They're
would they be
immortal
bored? Like
beings.
I just I don't
Samantha, there's an
see-
old,
yeah.
there's an old Hasidic parable actually as to why
about post-human
about Mario
Right.
walking out of the
right.
Simulation
out of
with
Mario
Luigi.
Kart 64. No, it's the question as to why did God create man and maybe woman? Because he likes stories, right? Because he likes to be entertained. I mean, ultimately, we are obsessed with narrative. We're obsessed with being digesting some sort of entertaining fiction that keeps us going day to day. We're striving for the next chapter in our drama. This is what most of our lives are in media entertainment. I understand your point as to some unknown entity who knows that thinks in those terms.
Right.
Of course. It's a question of probability. The fact that it's possible, I think, is what guys like Bostrom are banking on, and that's why it remains in the theoretical realm.
Yeah, I think it's possible, and that's why I think it makes it as an interesting discussion. But again, where I get really stuck is the trying to do mind reading for creatures that don't exist, and just assuming the same. Because even in the example, the Hasidic parable that you're referring to, that still, as humans, when we propose what God or gods would believe, we're using our own minds and our own motivations to postulate what these other beings, what these supernatural beings want and what their motivations are. But were there really a God, or were there really a super programmer or an alien or a future AI, whatever? Would we really know what they think? You know, it's the same to me as when we start postulating, when we start talking about aliens, and the aliens that we end up drawing end up looking kind of like us. They're just like maybe a little shorter, have bigger heads or something, and it just seems very narcissistic. And I just don't see why aliens or future creatures would have the same motivations or interests as us, especially if they are so advanced that they can create this whole simulated universe. Then why on earth would they be bored or just want stories, or were there soap operas?
I think the idea is that once they have the means, they'll create everything that they can. Sort of when you think of the internet, right? And you could think of anything in your mind right now, like search for things you've never thought of before. It exists it exists on the internet. Somebody thought of it, and it's out there because it's so easy to create data on the internet to create some sort of information.
Do you mean there's going to be like a lolcat universe?
Well,
Wow.
When you think, there definitely is. When you think of the deep web, the dark web, most of the internet that we interact with is
was
actually
just thinking of the dark
scratching,
web.
scratching the surface of things that are, again, like literally trillions upon trillions of libraries of Alexandria that none of us are ever going to get to going past the first few layers of. And so I suppose maybe this is a technology we have available to us today already. Then it does, and when you think of Moore's law, that there's exponential increase in processing power and data processing, then it does perhaps start to become more probable that maybe within 500, 1,000, 5,000 years, everything that you can think of would have been created, would have been proposed and created and experienced.
It's not because the universe is a simulation that the post-human humans, the its, are really looking at us or anywhere near us. It could be post-human humans, maybe we're somebody's high school experiment in a post-human world, and we just happen to be sort of viral-like particles at one end of that experiment that nobody's looking at. And we are, in fact, are living completely unobserved lives, and that millennia will go by, and one day the Earth will become a red sun, and the Earth will be swallowed up. When the Earth becomes a red giant, the Earth will be swallowed up, and our descendants will cease to exist, and we'll never have matter to anybody. But it'll still be a simulation. Remember, the essence of believing in a simulation makes our existence irrelevant, and that's one of the reasons I find it anathema to my way of thinking, and why philosophers would want to postulate that type of unprovable hypothesis. It almost, again, takes the position of religion in being unprovable and unknowable, to your point, Samantha. And at the end of the day, I still believe this is a creation of man's mind, and it does not exist outside man's mind, and is a creation of man's mind with this eternal optimism about being or becoming eternal, becoming immortal, becoming one with the machine, reaching Kurzweil's singularity with a view to continuing to exist forever. That is foreseeable. that is actually truly foreseeable. But you don't need to go along this fantastical hallucinatory road of believing we all exist in a simulation. How about we all exist, and if not my generation, then your generation, and certainly Eva and Nina's generation, will have the ability to live forever. Wouldn't that be awesome?
It's very positive, and you alluded before to people of your generation and a bit older who strive for external life and start getting into theology. Just because it's maybe plausible that we will transcend our lives and death and that there'll be an end to aging doesn't mean that that's going to be a very good outcome. Doesn't mean
Why?
that, well, because then other things can be created, other unanticipated or unintended consequences of that type of existence can occur. You could have people with different sorts of power concentrations in that type of world that could be exploitative. There could be parallel technologies like AI, which is what all these Elon Musk or Bill Gates or all sorts of leading minds in tech go on about being a very serious threat to international order and security. And there can be, we could be getting to the point where we live together, we live forever, but there can be a parallel development that upends that. Well, maybe then
that we live together in a dystopian future, and that it's awful, that we're just plugged into the matrix, or
that the AIs have more power to harvest from us, perhaps.
Boy, this whole debate is making me so hungry. I'm eating these chocolate chip cookies because I think my brain is now convincing me they don't exist. And if
they have no calories,
simulation, they have no calories. Let's test this and see if my butt's bigger tomorrow or not.
The one thing that seems absent from these theories is sort of evidence on the creator, right? Daniel, based on what your research has shown on these sort of philosophies, what are some of the more popular theories as to who's behind this? Is it a humanoid? Is it a godlike figure? Who is programming this?
My understanding of it is that these are descendants of human beings today who have transcended their physiology through AI and through tech replacements of the flesh. I mean, like we keep coming back to this. There's a whole mind-body dichotomy that is really at the core of all this. This notion that the spirit and the soul and the mind is independent of the flesh and the body, and that we can extricate it and through technological innovation. But at the end of this, once we become these sort of wisps that can will things through magical technologies, then we get bored and we want to just replay the whole tape and watch you and me and my family here at this table talk and live life.
So we're future humans, like YouTube channel or something?
Well, yeah. That's right. Yes, we're essentially a YouTube channel.
I wonder how many likes we have or what's in the comment thread.
I don't know what comment threads are like in the future.
In the future simulations.
But wait a minute. What if our future selves are simulating our past selves? And we are just in a simulation of great entertainment to our future selves.
That's exactly what the proposition is, in fact. Yes, this is what I was trying to describe.
No, the description, as I understood it, is they're ancestral simulations. The idea being that our descendants way, way, way into the future are simulating the history of the species. But what if it is more narcissistic?
Wait. What if it is our ancestors from the past that are simulating the future of us, and that's what they're really thinking of, and there's some sort of early hominid that sort of developed this simulation capacity, and we're just in the minds of our ancestors.
Actually, that's part of Elon Musk's spiel on this, actually, is that it's an infinite regression of different humans observing the other human, observing past lives, back and forth forever.
Okay, Battlestar Galactica, here we come.
What does it mean if this is a simulation? If we are these post-humans, let's dig a bit further into this. What would it change for humanity and for you if we were to reveal one day that yes, we are in fact living in the Matrix?
I can't decide whether it's uplifting or upsetting. I often oscillate. I think naturally I go to it's upsetting, right? Because it feels as though there's no more magic or purpose to what we're doing day to day. We're just someone's entertainment in some sort of future circus. Though the other part of it is that nothing matters anymore and that my mind is cast to naughty things.
I guess it becomes like a Truman Show type thing. Like, what if if our whole reality didn't actually exist, and then you can just... And everyone's just watching.
Well, like in the Truman Show or like in the Matrix, then you get into liberation ideology. That's really where like the hope, the parts of us that hope for something satisfying go to. But I was going somewhere else. Like maybe then
Just go kill everybody, just turn into Grand Theft Auto.
essentially.
Right. That's the other simulation.
Come on. All of this is really also the goal of physicists in quantum physics, to go back to the period before the Big Bang, or to go to the period after the end of the universe, or to know what is outside and beyond, because we still have no grand unified theory. We still have no conception of time or space that is in fact infinite. That the actual reality we're living in turns out to be finite. Time is finite because the universe had a fixed beginning, the Big Bang, and that keeps begging the question, well, how do you jump out of the simulation? And I'm quite intrigued by the number of physicists who, when they're talking about the different postulates that exist today for a grand unified theory of physics, keep talking about the size of the universe in terms of data. Because, for instance, there's more dark matter than visible matter in the universe. Apparently, there is no such thing as the event horizon in a black hole. And as you go into these ever theories of ever increasing complexity, because I realize I don't want to get bogged down in that in this debate. It begs the question for physicists how to break out of the confines of Einstein's conception of general relativity. How do you go beyond? Where is the rest of the universe? Where's the rest of time? I'm a simpler girl. I just want to know how to go back in time. I just want to go back to when I was 22 years old and thinner and perkier. I'm not any fancier than that. I don't need the beginning of the universe. So for me, the idea of knowing that reality is a simulation would beg exactly that question. I want to jack out. I want to be Neo who steps out. And I recognize, as a huge fan of The Matrix, that I may be jacking out of what looks like this reality. That was the exquisite idea of The Matrix. And that when you go into the real reality, you're going into a dystopian world. So I recognize there's that risk, but I'd still love to be out of the fake reality and into the real reality, whatever that means. And there are many philosophers who would say this very debate is meaningless because they already don't believe that reality is real. I caution you.
Well, I think Einstein wanted actually something similar. He wanted to go forward in time to when you were 22 years old to get to know you.
Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you, Daniel.
And I guess for me, whether we live in a simulation or not is, I don't know. It just seems largely irrelevant. Do I want to get out of the simulation? I can't even fathom if it would be possible to get out of the simulation. It assumes that I am an organic being and I can just, and that's like Westworld. And if I just find a way to get past some sort of border, then I will be out into the real world. And it just seems so beyond my conception. And this is my life and I have my people in it. And I have the people I love and that I care about, and I don't want to leave them. And even then, to understand, even if I knew that, like, okay, I'm actually living in a simulation and this is somebody else's creation, then would I want to go harm? Like, I think it does raise some interesting moral questions, but the bottom line is, for me personally, that if I assume that I still feel pain and pleasure and other people still feel pain and pleasure, then my morality is still going to be largely the same. And then it's not going to make any difference in terms of how I lead my life.
Here. That I hugely agree. I think that was the big provocation from you, Daniel.
Well, hold on.
Wouldn't give me any. I wouldn't now think, oh well, a bank is a non-existent collection of 403 lines of code in somebody's very large program, and therefore I can go muck around in those 403 lines and blow up the bank and take out all the money, which doesn't really exist. That it would never inspire me that way.
Unless it's a moral good to entertain the audience and to come up with more dramatic.
Well, somebody would have to descend from on high and convince me of that.
Well, no, the morality question, I agree, was provocative, and it doesn't necessarily go to where I was trying to take it, which is just to run amok. But what I do find, whether or not this is true or not, why it's exciting topic of conversation for me is that it's a springboard to consider parallel questions about our own consciousness. Like, Samantha, when you were just talking about being satisfied with your current life and the people that you love and where you're heading, I think to myself, to what extent could those things change in an instant? I mean, God forbid there was a traumatic brain injury that were to occur to you or to me, and my mind is reset. All the values that I have, the people that I know and that I love it's completely thrown off my experiences to that point. Then my experience of life and my values would change, and my my conception of life would be completely different. And I think to myself with these questions that it's sort of like, to what extent is the consciousness that we've built since we were born till today is malleable, and is some sort of securing fiction that we have because it's all we've known.
Of course, it's malleable. Catholics predicate an entire theology on the notion of tabula rasa.
Well, that's
right?
Catholics, or as well, you just think of Eastern Buddhism, people who can meditate and perhaps, maybe in this at a dinner table can feel as though they're in the savannas of Africa just through willpower alone, through just bending their consciousness to that place. And the morality of all this would be, is this a good thing? I mean, if you're in an unhappy place and you have really gotten so limber in your consciousness that in a heartbeat you can really cast your mind and your values and your personality elsewhere to a safer, happier place, that can be a good thing.
Actually, it would be awesome. In fact, probably the greatest value to this line of thinking is to continue to study its impact as a thought experiment, because at the end of the day, more of us are living lives of the mind than ever before, as you pointed out, not just because your smartphone is in your pocket and you can acquire the knowledge of humanity in a moment with a few clicks on a computer keyboard, but if it did provide, without resorting to mysticism or spirituality or religion, if it provided a mechanism by which you could abstract your conception of reality in a different way by saying to yourself, this is a simulation, ergo I can redefine my perception of reality, it might be a way, without going through the conduit of psychology, which is your area, Samantha, by which you could view differently how you perceive and how you experience your life and your interactions with others.
But you can perceive your life and your interactions with others through myriad different ways that don't necessitate inventing a post-human who programmed us or put us in a simulation. You could do that through religion, through meditation, through positive thinking, through travel, through brain damage. There's all sorts of ways that you could attain different types of consciousness or different...
I think just they're not as stark and totalizing as this thought experiment.
Sure. And I think questions of consciousness are really interesting, absolutely. And I think that there is a large extent to which we are limited by our senses and by our tools, and we will never know everything, and it's impossible to know everything. And even when we are interpreting... C point one, that we are limited by our senses and by our tools, and even by our own brains. And so there's only so much. We're always going to be interpreting what input comes in through our own minds and through our own conceptions and through our own limited sensations. And even if we develop sophisticated tools, we're still the ones creating those sophisticated tools. And so they still follow our own logic in a certain way, and we still have to interpret the data from them. So there is an extent to which we can never know. I don't think we can ever know reality. We just get to closer and closer approximations.
We have evidence. Mom believes she knows everything.
Mom she knows everything.
We do have evidence that Mom believes she knows everything. Yes.
I would remind you, one of the reasons I know everything is because I've seen Blade Runner, including the director's cut. And I can draw my mind to Rutger Hauer back when he was so hot and was not, in fact, human because he was a replicant. And he taught me everything I needed to know about how replicants perceive the cores of other suns. And that informed me as a human to how non-human beings can perceive the universe. And I can prove to you that we can abstract the notion of a simulation by simply conflating two important scenes in pop culture. The Simpsons, where Homer Simpson is in the house and he's walking outside by the living room window at the same time. And also in The Matrix, when you see the same cat 2 times and you learn that there's a glitch in the Matrix.
Did you ever notice the boom mic that just appears spontaneously every once in a while? Like when I wake up in the morning, I just notice a boom mic just in the corner and then it just kind of disappears. Has anyone else noticed that? Has anyone seen that?
There is a website where you can actually go and find all those glitches and all your best stories, like mysterious boom mics and Rolex watches, which appear in movies about 15th century France.
See, so we are becoming aware of the simulation.
Well, there we are.
There we go.
Well, don't tell Dan.
Right, he'll reprogram us.
I won't do that, but I'll put another spin on it. What if we take the Bostrom theory and just say that, maybe we are organic matter, of course, and everything we know about the world as we know it tends to be true, but we were perhaps still placed here a long time ago by perhaps these post-humans or by another creature. How did humans eventually, or how did life find its way to Earth? Is that perhaps the next angle for this debate?
Was that part of the debate in the Alien series?
Yes.
Many films. Fifth Element.
Many
we
films.
could go on and
Yeah.
on and on. Those are also simulations.
Also, again, Battlestar Galactica.
True that.
Right.
Also Battlestar Galactica, right? Or the fact, or that other theory Bostrom has about embryo selection for genetic enhancement, because that would be Gattaca. And I feel like writing to the man and say, your problem is you're staying in the ivory tower too much, because had you seen Gattaca, and then you would know how unhappy the humans were, the super duper humans that were created by genetic selection, you would realize that that's not the recipe for enhancing humanity.
Back to your question, Dan. The problem with that idea is that it always comes down to then who created the creators, right? We're always coming back to the same theological questions of old, and this debate will constantly be in orbit of those old ancient questions. It's always going to be coming down to that. I much prefer. It's funny, I alluded in our previous episode that I kind of define myself these days as a post-atheist, as frustrating or as obnoxious as that label can be. When I was younger and more of an atheist and more into those types of debates, I always found it very interesting when people would say, well, if you're a secular humanist and you just believe in evolution, then how do you explain the beauty of the world? Right, sort of the intelligent design argument. And I always found it far more beautiful that there is just essentially a bunch of space dust that starts to bond and starts to orbit around itself and make little spheres where you have some moisture and some minerals. And there's this great continuity, as Mom alluded to earlier in this conversation, the continuity from the rock to, not the actor, but as in a pebble, a boulder, or some mineral to myself talking right now, that essentially consciousness is a spectrum.
And they were all stardust.
Some of us. Not Dan.
Not Dan, except for Dan, who programmed the stars.
Yes, Dan always was and always will be.
Is there any evidence out there for some kind of intelligent design or some kind of programming? I think to the hexagon, for example, a shape that reappears constantly in nature. Snowflakes, honeycombs, etc. Seems to be the most structurally sound shape for building things in nature. Do you think there's evidence out there or possible evidence of this design?
Wait, I got this. No.
Did I tell you she's my personal entertainment advice? Seriously, dude. Proof. Exhibit S for Samantha.
I think it's actually more a question of our perception of these beautiful objects or structures that exist out there in nature. I remember H.G. Wells, who wrote War of the Worlds, a great science fiction writer, actually wrote a history of the Earth, a complete history of the Earth. It was about 1,000 pages, and he wrote this in the 1920s, and I actually listened to the audiobook version of it, and it's very interesting to listen to someone speak about the origins of the universe and from his perspective in the 1920s. One of the things that he talks about, though, is the rise of religion. And he says you start seeing in ancient cavemen and certain etchings, and you see evidence of what he called triskelion symbols, where you see things like crosses, you see things actually like swastika or stars of David, certain figures that are symmetrical and often where there's lines that are crossing each other at some sort of joint point. And he talks about this as that striving for transcendence, that human beings in their infancy and to their adulthood, I suppose, or maybe we're in our adolescence, start to look at objects around in the world, and whenever things intersect, they see it's sort of it expresses a certain beauty and cohesion that they're trying to find in the world. And so I think maybe that speaks more to your point about maybe looking at hexagons and snowflakes around and seeing symmetry and beauty and magic and programming. I think that's us just being programmed to see those things.
And looking beyond, I'll end here. We'll probably do a full episode at some point about aliens, about the evidence that some people say exists. But what do you think is out there? Is anything out there? Are we alone in the universe? And what is your imagining of what else could be out there?
I think I think we're absolutely not alone in the universe. I think the question becomes that there's other life in the universe. The question is, what does that life look like, and is it something that we could even perceive, even if we were looking directly at it, that we'd be able to interact with, and what it would be? I don't think it's necessarily little green men that would come over and have their own language and long bulbous fingers, because that's too similar to us. I think that. But given the size of the universe and given the how long the universe has been around and continues to be around, it seems almost unfathomable that there wouldn't be some form of life somewhere in the universe. The question just becomes again, what would that be and what it would look like? And to that, I have no idea how even to conceive of it.
I think part of the problem is that the question to be meaningful has to include the span of all time to come to a meaningful figure, because if you consider from the beginning of the universe until now, then it's much easier to say that it's certain, as to Samantha's point, that there have been other developed civilizations. The question is, are any of those developed civilizations actually coexisting with us in this very small, tiny teardrop of time that we've been around? And even if so, are they close enough in this universe, in this space-time continuum, for us ever to make contact with them? If you remember back in 1961, and I do because I wrote about this when I was in elementary school, there was the Drake equation written.
You wrote something in 1961? When you were 1 year old?
I wrote
Well,
about
you
it
really
when
were advanced.
while I was in elementary school, not quite when I was 1, but I wrote about this maybe when I was 8, 9, 10 years old. I was interested in all this stuff then. The Drake equation, which was an equation developed by an astrophysicist, oddly enough by the name of Drake, who multiplied a bunch of probabilities. He applied straight math to probabilities. The probability of a sun, he presumed. How many suns would be out there that would be similar to ours in age and size? You don't want a red giant. You don't want a white dwarf star. You certainly want a black hole. I don't know if black holes had been conceived of even then. So a yellow star about our age, and how many that would have planets, and of the planets, how many would have planets in what's considered to be the distance that would presume Earth, the hospitable zone that would presume temperatures on the surface compatible with carbon-based life, how many would have developed carbon-based life, how many wouldn't be water plants, would have enough land, and on, a very long equation. And he came to figures that indicated it was pretty much certain that there must be life elsewhere in the planet that was as developed as ours, if not more so. And that his calculations have been updated by two scientists by the name of Frank and Sullivan, which kind of sounds like the name of a circus, Frank and Sullivan, or maybe the name of a law firm. And those figures have been improved and updated. But it doesn't change the fact that we're still far, not having developed skills involving interstellar travel, we're pretty far from figuring out how we would get out there to go and check out even the neighborhood, our close neighborhood in the Milky Way, to see if there's any people or people-like critters out there for us to interact with. The conception of aliens who are pretty benign. I'm more inclined to believe that aliens who'd be out there exploring would be likely to be benign, because if you've reached a point in civilization and technology that you're able to engage in interstellar travel, finding unoccupied planets in order to take resources would be a piece of cake. And if you'd happen to find some neighbors, you'd be inclined to knock on the door and say hi and try
and then eat them.
And yeah, well, that's me. That's only if I were doing the traveling.
Yeah, I don't know. I always think, what are they going to do for me? I'm kind of not very excited about the idea of extraterrestrial life. I think, I don't know, are they going to help me make money or find a family, hurt my, fix my back pain? I don't find it very exciting. There's already enough alienation around here. I don't find it, I don't find it anything. I don't find it crosses some sort of Rubicon for me. It's like there's already like strange animals on this planet that I feel alien from, and that I could look at, and they're probably looking at me and also alienated and indifferent, and some of them probably want to be my friend, and I can't tell. And I don't know. I find a lot of alien life discussions kind of boring. There's enough alien life like on Earth.
On Earth to discover. Yeah, as they're exploring more of the deep oceans and deep caves and finding creatures that really do.
Oh my God! I thought that was like War of the Worlds warning. Tom Cruise, War of the Worlds.
As we're discovering, as we're exploring more the Earth's depths and deep oceans and deep caves and volcanoes, then we are discovering more and more critters and creatures that do operate very differently than us and do frankly look pretty alien.
What about the people around you that you don't know very well?
Well, to me, it's like it's not something that I'm going to occupy a whole lot of time dedicated to because I can't travel space. I have no way of communicating with aliens, nor do I think that they would be able to understand me if I did communicate with them, or that they're listening, or that I would be able to even perceive them with my limited senses, even if they were standing right in front of me. Maybe there's one sitting on this table in front of me, waving and smacking me on the head, and I just have no idea because my senses are so limited that I can't perceive what they are. Do I think if aliens, there were these super beings that could travel across galaxies and intended to make contact with us, do I think they would be benign and it would go well? Assuming that they're anything like us, which I think is a dubious assumption, but let's go with it because we have nothing else to base ourselves on, then I think we'd probably be annihilated. In which case,
if they were anything like us, forget it.
Well, and for many different reasons. Even if they didn't intend to, they would just, give us some cootied blankets, and that would be the end of us.
Or space chlamydia.
Or space chlamydia, which is really it's really terrible. It's really what wiped out all the other beings in our solar system.
It just burns a little bit. You take a pill.
It's fine.
A little penicillin, you're good.
Right. So once we get back to aliens, again, if they were these super intelligent beings and did have some way to communicate with us and actually chose to come to Earth, then I don't think it would be for me to be entirely concerned either, because I'd probably be dead shortly thereafter.
Okay, let's end with further reading or viewing on the topic. I'm guessing we'll have some interesting fictional selections this week, guys.
They're all movies today. Today, everything that you need to see to consider the concept of the world being a simulation, or the concept of generating superhumans, can be covered by watching a number of key films. Blade Runner, Director's Cut.
I vote for...
Wait, not finished.
No, but you're just going to give a whole big list. No, that's not fair.
Gattaca.
No, you can't do that. Why
Yes,
don't you just
yes,
hashtag
Arrival.
all sci-fi?
Hashtag all the movies. All the movies, says the boss of the simulation.
Prometheus. Wait.
Keep going.
Fifth Dimension.
Keep going.
Well, they're all the
Get the names wrong too. Fifth Dimension, sure.
The hell with you. No, not Fifth Dimension.
Battlestar
Fifth
Galactica.
Dimension. The whole series number 2.
The whole series. 2001: A Space Odyssey.
And all the Matrix movies.
Also
Not
the
2001.
Simpsons. Also the Simpsons. That's important.
Simpsons is not funny anymore. Forget it. That's over. That ended when you children were babies.
For my recommendation, I would go with Battlestar Galactica. And the whole series, one, just because it's a phenomenal series and it's really just really touches. It's even though it's talking about a future, it still touches on a lot of issues that could be topical for us today. I think it does get into interesting issues around sort of post-human beings or creatures, really advanced AI that develops their own consciousness. And I think it gets into. I don't want to give away the ending, but watch it. There's reasons I'm recommending it that are pertinent to this discussion.
I will go further with your recommendation and say if you want to have your way of thinking challenged with respect to religious beliefs in general, or your perception of the difference between terrorists and freedom fighters and other topics we've touched upon, Battlestar Galactica is definitely the series.
If I had to think of an endorsement that somewhat relates to what we're talking about, I would go with the 1992 film Stay Tuned, which is a schlocky kind of Z-grade comedy with Jeffrey Jones and Catherine O'Hara, where they play these TV-addicted husband and wife who get sucked into their television, and it's a bunch of spoofs about TV shows that were popular at the time, and it makes you think about being disconnected from reality.
Don't forget to check out thegoldwaters.ca. Join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter with the hashtag #TheGoldWaters. You can follow us on both those social platforms. And if you have any feedback, email us, talk@thegoldwaters.ca. We may read your comments on a future episode. I'm Dan Delmar, your moderator. Thank you, Goldwaters.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
All right, simulation ending.
The best one of us is going to survive.
Crush you.
Provocateur.media.